The man suspected of the Berlin Christmas market attack is shot dead in Italy. Anis Amri was stopped by police in Milan in the early hours outside a train station.
Nel momento in cui è stato fermato,
at that moment, the man, without hesitating, pulled out a pistol and fired towards the policeman who'd asked for identity documents.
So-called Islamic State releases footage showing Amri pledging allegiance to them. But the hunt continues tonight for any possible accomplices of Anis Amri. Also tonight, 2 British men are convicted of using Muslim aid convoys from the UK to Syria to provide cash for extremists. The round-the-clock work on the railways that will mean no trains on many lines this Christmas. How a third of the homeless say they have been attacked on our streets. And all smiles for Big Sam as he returns to the Premier League as Crystal Palace's new manager.
In the south, from war-torn Syria to a warm welcome in Wokingham. But other councils are criticised for not doing enough for refugees. And a bravery award for the police officer who helped save a football fan's life at Euro 2016.
Good evening. The hunt for the man who's believed to have carried out the Berlin Christmas market attack is over. Anis Amri, who'd evaded capture for 4 days, was killed in Milan during a shootout with 2 police officers. Train tickets found on his body indicate that he travelled from Germany to France and then on to Italy undetected despite the Europe-wide alert. 12 people died and dozens were injured when a lorry was driven into a crowd of shoppers on Monday night. Germany has said it is relieved that Amri no longer poses a danger, but officials have warned that he may have had accomplices. From Berlin, our Europe correspondent Damien Grammaticus has the latest.
Anis Amri's brief, violent life as a terrorist ended here, in an exchange of gunfire on the edge of Milan. Alone and hunted, he'd managed to flee 1,000 kilometres south from Berlin. But at 3 in the morning, acting suspiciously, he was stopped by 2 officers and tried to shoot them.
Nel momento in cui è stato fermato,
at that moment, the man, without hesitating, pulled out a pistol and fired towards the policeman who'd asked for identity documents. The officers reacted immediately. The one who was hit is recovering in hospital, but his condition is not life-threatening.
And this has been released by the so-called Islamic State, a recording made in Berlin by Anis Amri sometime before the attack, pledging his allegiance to IS. It's now believed that the 24-year-old Tunisian may have been radicalised after he arrived in Europe, perhaps during the 4 years he spent in jail in Italy. German security services knew he was a threat, but he talked of buying guns, not using a truck. So how did he get all the way to Italy? This is what we know about his movements. At 8 p.m. on Monday, he attacked the Christmas market. Then he vanished, but managed to get to Chambéry in France. From there, a train ticket found on his body showed he travelled to Turin and then on to Milan Central Station, arriving at 1 in the morning. Finally, he took the metro to the last stop, San Giovanni, where he was shot.
Wir können zum Ende dieser Woche erleichtert sein.
At the end of this week, we can be relieved that one acute threat has come to an end, but the general threat posed by terrorism will continue. We will do our utmost to make sure our state is a strong state.
So Germany is now trying to root out radical Islamic networks. We visited this place today, a short distance from where Anis Amri's new video was recorded.
Well, this is one of the places that Anis Amri was known to frequent in the months when he was in Berlin. It's a residential complex, but the reason he would come here, over in this corner, what used to be a mosque, it was closed down though and became a meeting point for radical Islamists.
One of the neighbours told us small groups of young Islamic men continued to use the building. They'd meet late at night, apparently discussing attacks.
Of course it was dangerous. When the men sit here and fantasize about carrying out attacks, yes, I was worried. My children and my family live here.
With the immediate danger apparently over, Berliners gathered for a memorial this evening by the Brandenburg Gate.
No matter what, we are all one. all people come together here and think of the victims.
The Berlin people, where something is, they have to be.
But Germany is a country now confronting the reality it faces new and hidden threats.
Well, let's talk to Damien, who's in Berlin for us tonight. Damien, as far as the hunt for Amri's accomplices or possible accomplices is concerned, that goes on. And it was by pure chance that Italian police found Amri at all.
It was, Fiona. I mean, this was a stop by a routine police patrol which found him, and it was an officer who'd only been in the Italian police force for 9 months who shot him dead. It wasn't a Europe-wide anti-terror swoop that caught him. Now, that has led today to some calls, notably from people like the far-right leader Marine Le Pen in France, for more border security within Europe. I think the German government's view is a little different, that trying to control and monitor the movements of all people around Europe is very, very complicated. But they would, I think, say that what this shows is that anti-terror cooperation actually did work and that they were able to identify very quickly who had been shot in Milan. But there are questions. Anis Amri's own mother has given an interview this evening in Tunisia saying why was her son not deported as Italy wanted to send him back, Germany wanted to send him back, why would Tunisia not accept him back? She has unanswered questions, and unanswered questions here too, as you were saying. Did he have a network of supporters who helped him plan what he did here and may have helped him escape? Angela Merkel has said that there will be a thorough investigation that will look into all areas where there may have been failings. And she also warned Germany is going to toughen its procedures for deporting those who do not have the right to stay in this country. But for now, Germany's government says that, as across Europe, the threat of terror attacks remains high here. Fiona.
Damien Grammaticus in Berlin, thank you. 2 men have been found guilty of using aid convoys to send thousands of pounds in cash to extremists in Syria. The Old Bailey heard how high-profile Muslim community-led convoys became unwitting participants in a plan to fund terrorism. One of the aid missions which was targeted included Alan Henning, the Eccles taxi driver later kidnapped and murdered by militants from so-called Islamic State. Dominic Kashani reports.
We're going through the back alleys of Syria, Aleppo. We're going through Sniper Alley.
Humanitarian aid for people stuck in one of the most dangerous places on earth. Britons have donated millions to help civilians caught in the crossfire of Syria's conflict. 3 years ago, these convoys were at the heart of those efforts. Now 2 men have been found guilty of infiltrating them. Syed Hock, a former probation officer, and Mashoud Mia used the aid missions as cover to send cash to fighters. Hock was sent these pictures by his nephew, who was fighting with a group affiliated to Al-Qaeda. Hock advised him to behead his enemies, but not mutilate them, and sent £4,500 over 2 unwitting convoys.
Aid convoys were infiltrated, and the goodwill of charities was abused by taking money and goods from the UK out to Syria to help terrorists.
Today's verdict is the first formal finding that the Syria aid convoys were exploited for terrorism. But there were also tears in the public gallery for 2 men who were acquitted. Tears that highlight how complicated and emotive the issues raised by the Syria conflict have been for Muslim communities.
It's all worthwhile when you see what is needed actually get to where it needs to go.
Alan Henning, taken hostage by so-called Islamic State in December 2013 and murdered 9 months later. He went into Syria on one of the convoys abused by the guilty men. Pervez Rafiq, today cleared of funding terrorism, was on that same convoy. He publicly appealed for Mr. Henning's life.
We beg you to tread the path of justice and show him the compassion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in the hearts of the believers.
Under pressure from the government and the police, the aid convoys came to an end after Mr. Henning's kidnap. Dominic Kashani, BBC News.
In an unprecedented move and a strong rebuke tonight, the United States has abstained from a UN resolution which criticises Israel. Traditionally, the US has always used its veto to stop such resolutions against its close ally. It condemns Israeli settlement building on occupied Palestinian territory and passed with 14 votes in favour. Our correspondent Barbara Plett-Usher is in Washington for us tonight. Barbara, this has caused a diplomatic storm tonight. What more can you tell us?
Well, I think the resolution shows a strong international consensus that Israeli settlement building in the occupied Palestinian territories is illegal and is a very serious threat to a viable peace deal. And the Obama administration strongly felt that there was this threat, so it decided not to veto, it abstained, and therefore the resolution passed. But this is something that was a diplomatic earthquake at the UN, because the Americans always support the Israelis there. They always protect Israel against criticism. So it was a very strong rebuke, as you said, and the Israelis are very angry. But President Obama's only taken this step right at the end of his administration, so it's going to have far less of an impact than it might have done if he'd done it earlier. Right now, he's really just putting down a marker, especially as he's going to be handing over to Donald Trump, who has shown that he's ready to strongly support the Israeli government and its policies. And in fact, after the vote, he's already tweeted, things will be different after January 20th, which is, of course, when he takes office.
Barbara Plett-Usher in Washington, thank you. Extensive rail engineering is starting across Britain tonight, with 200 different projects being carried out over the Christmas break. The biggest re-signalling scheme in the network's history will close the line between Cardiff Central and the Valleys. And several stations, including Paddington in London, will be either partially or completely shut for several days. Our transport correspondent Richard Westcott reports.
It's going to be the biggest rail upgrade ever taken on, and it all starts late tonight, hitting services across South Wales, London and Manchester. The lack of trains will make the roads busier. This was the M6 today. And it's a popular time to fly away for the holidays. Here's Stansted. So why do they always pick Christmas to close the railways?
We have a huge programme of works that we have to deliver as part of our railway upgrade programme, and some of that work just can't be done on a live railway. We have to shut the railway. And so Christmas is the best time to do it because it's one of the quietest times of year.
24,000 engineers will work on 200 sites across Britain. Well, one of the bigger jobs they're doing this Christmas is to open up and test these new lines between the concrete blocks there. Critically, they unblock a bottleneck between the trains going from Heathrow into Paddington Station in London. It'll hit services across the country. Paddington Station will actually close for 6 days after the last train leaves tonight. Services at other big stations, including London Bridge, Charing Cross and Liverpool Street, will be severely affected. There'll be no trains late on Christmas Eve between Cardiff Central, Bridgend, Newport and the Valleys because they're re-signalling the whole area.
It's affected me that I have to take an extra day off work because of the replacement bus service not being good enough for what I need, and also I understand that the work needs to be done.
They know it's the busiest time of the year. Families want to get together and they haven't seen each other for a while, and then they're all disrupted, aren't they?
Totally inconvenient because, you know, a lot of commuters over the Christmas period, shopping as well in between Christmas and New Year.
As ever, leave plenty of time before you head off and double check your train's even running. Richard Westcott, BBC News.
Vladimir Putin has written to Donald Trump, calling for stronger relations and cooperation between their countries. And speaking to the world's media in Moscow, the Russian president said he did not want a new arms race with the West after Donald Trump suggested he would expand America's nuclear arsenal. Mr. Putin also rejected accusations that Russia had intervened in the US presidential election. From Moscow, Steve Rosenberg reports.
He's always confident. But is he a little confused? As Vladimir Putin met the world's media today, there were mixed signals from across the Atlantic. Donald Trump saber-rattling one moment and talking friendship the next. The Kremlin leader said he hoped he and America's new president would work together to improve relations. It's not so simple. Russia says it's modernizing its nuclear missile potential, while today Donald Trump reportedly said, "Let it be an arms race. We will outmatch them at every pass." So, would the Kremlin respond? Well, putting a question to the president isn't easy when there are 1,000 of you and just one of him. But he took my question.
Are you not concerned, though, that there is a danger of a new arms race if America is talking about boosting its nuclear arsenal.
The basis for a new arms race was there already after the US pulled out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty and started to create a missile shield. So either we had to build our own shield or, as we're doing, develop weapons to penetrate theirs. But this wasn't our choice.
Vladimir Putin made it clear today that if there is to be a new arms race, that won't be Russia's fault. And he delivered a defiant message that Russia is stronger than any potential aggressor. And that goes for cyberspace too. In recent months, Russia has been accused of launching cyber attacks against America, even of using hacking to defeat Hillary Clinton.
Mr. President, your country has been accused of state-sponsored hacking with the aim of influencing the result of the US presidential election. And President Obama revealed that he told you personally to cut it out. So what did you tell him in response?
The president refused to say, dismissing all the talk of hacking as sour grapes from the Democratic Party.
The losing side always tries to pass the buck. They would do better to look for the problems among themselves.
But tough talk doesn't solve domestic problems. The Russian economy is still struggling, not just because of sanctions. Low oil prices have hit hard an economy reliant on exporting energy. To many here, stagnation breeds pessimism.
They see growing problems with their living standards. They see that, health system is crumbling and collapsing. They see inflation. They see lack of perspective, and they see the forecast of the government that Russia will be surviving through the next 20 years in the state of stagnation.
And that is one reason the Kremlin is counting on Donald Trump, hoping he'll ease sanctions against Moscow. Russia wants to be seen as a global player. But if President Putin doesn't mend the cracks in the economy, he may be building a superpower on thin ice. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
In Syria, where Russian forces helped seize the city of Aleppo, the last buses have been taking away rebel fighters, their families and residents from the east of the city. The Red Cross say 35,000 people have left their homes in the last few weeks. After 4 long years of bombardment, Syrian government troops are now in complete control of Aleppo. Our Middle East editor Jeremy Byrne considers the significance of the victory and how it may affect the outcome of the war.
In western Aleppo, a Christmas party became a victory celebration. It was watched over by banners of Syria's 3 wise men, Presidents Putin and Assad, and the leader of Lebanon's Hezbollah movement. The regime's support is often underestimated in the West, and there was relief that the killing in the city might finally be over. The last buses out of eastern Aleppo delivered thousands of fighters and civilians into an uncertain future. The fall of eastern Aleppo is the rebels' greatest defeat, and it shows how the war is now being decided by the foreign powers that have intervened. So, what's next in Syria? Well, President Assad and his allies have won themselves some options. Their victory in Aleppo does not end the war. Thousands of rebel fighters have been bussed out to Idlib, the neighboring province. The regime and its allies will want to win it back. The question is when. They might decide to make eastern Ghouta their military priority. It's part of the suburbs of Damascus. It's vulnerable because rebel groups that control it have weakened themselves by infighting. Foreign powers are shaping the battlefields. Turkey has troops fighting in Syria and backed some of the rebel groups in Aleppo. But it watched while Russia and its allies destroyed them. That's because Turkey needs Russia to stand aside while it hits the Kurds, now its main target. And while East Aleppo fell, the West was also a bystander. And that is because the Syria policy of the Americans, British, and their friends, never coherent, has now failed completely. Aleppo, though, looks to be a turning point. Tonight, Britain's Foreign Secretary said again that President Assad must go. But the downfall of the president looks like a hollow dream. Diplomacy hasn't done it. Early in the war, there was a chance to make it happen by joining the fight. But that chance has gone while President Assad remains Russia and Iran's man. It won't be easy for his coalition to move from Aleppo to victory in Syria. But now, they have the momentum. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News.
Let's take a brief look at some of the day's other news stories. 2 hijackers who held over 100 passengers hostage on a flight which they diverted from Libya to Malta have been arrested after a standoff on the runway lasting several hours. The crew and passengers were gradually released before the men were taken away for questioning. The United Nations Refugee Agency says over 5,000 migrants and refugees have died in the Mediterranean this year, the highest annual death toll so far. About 100 migrants are reported to have died yesterday when 2 boats sank off the Italian coast. Strong winds and driving rain have affected much of the north and west of Britain as Storm Barbara blew in today. Worst affected was Scotland, where many ferry services were cancelled and a number of houses in more remote areas lost power. A survey of rough sleepers suggests they are 17 times more likely to be a victim of crime than the general public. The charity Crisis says homeless people are regularly attacked and abused. There are thought to be about 4,000 people sleeping rough in the UK at any one time. Our social affairs correspondent Michael Buchanan reports.
For some people, rough sleepers have no value. One stamps the head, the other kicks the legs.
I used to come in here and sleep on the trains, essentially. It was safe and it was warm.
Corky was homeless for 5 years. He took to sleeping on commuter trains after an unprovoked attack.
I was in Leicester Square, got into a discussion with a young man around the fact that I was homeless. He became quite aggravated, I would guess, by the fact that I was homeless and that I was saying that being homeless, everybody's an individual and people are homeless for different reasons. And from there, he ended up punching me in the face.
His experience is not unique. Today's report lays bare the abuse rough sleepers can suffer. They're subjected to beatings, assaulted, even urinated on.
It's not just the incident itself, but it's the impact it has on that individual. You know, we found that most homeless people who are rough sleeping, actually they feel ashamed already. And surely if you're then urinated on, you're going to feel even more ashamed and even more marginalised.
So your eyesight, who's looking after that?
Sergeant David Deal is part of a police outreach team that works with rough sleepers.
It's no life, is it?
While he encourages them to report crimes, he understands why today's report says many don't trust the police.
There's other aspects of their life, maybe drug use, maybe begging, maybe other forms of antisocial behaviour. When they come into contact with police regarding those types of behaviour, that's when they might not trust police because they maybe get arrested.
For these homeless people, this centre will provide shelter and sustenance over Christmas. Susan Walker is currently bedding down in a stairwell. Sleep is uneasy due to her constant fear of attack.
Being raped, yeah, because, you know, you can get some of these people now, see a woman and they say, oh, you know, I'll go for her. And if that happened, well, as a woman, we wouldn't have no chance.
Rough sleepers are permanently vulnerable. They have no shelter. Any stranger could attack at any moment. Unfortunately, some do. Michael Buchanan, BBC News.
The former England manager Sam Allardyce has agreed a deal to become the new manager of Crystal Palace. Allardyce has been out of the game since having to leave the England job in September after just one match, following remarks he made to undercover reporters. Here's our sports correspondent, Richard Conway.
3 months on from losing his dream job as England manager, Sam Allardyce is smiling once more.
I like the look of the squad, and that's probably the reason that I'm here. You've not seen this one before, have you?
He was forced out of Wembley after just one match in charge.
It's not a problem now.
Following a newspaper sting in which he discussed getting around FA transfer regulations. A period on the sidelines looked inevitable.
Was that your last job in football, though?
Who knows? We'll wait and see.
But Alan Pardew has manoeuvred himself out of the Crystal Palace hot seat after winning just 26 points in his 36 games in charge this year. And Allardyce well, he is seen as an expert in keeping teams in the top division, in a career that spans periods in charge of Bolton, Blackburn, West Ham and Sunderland. With Crystal Palace flirting with relegation, the club's new American owners have been forced to take action. An attempt this season to play a more expansive style of football looks likely to be abandoned. The focus now will be doing whatever it takes to stay in the Premier League.
I think any team that gets Big Sam will, tell you that he's never got a team relegated. So it's a great record, and I'm sure Palace will have that in the back of their mind.
For Sam Allardyce, there is unfinished business to attend to after his briefest of stints with England. Crystal Palace will settle for survival for now, but this ambitious club hope in time he'll do much more than just keep them up. Richard Conway, BBC News, Selhurst Park.
And that's it from me. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a very good night.